Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Wisdom Web podcast. I am Tejaswini, your friendly neighborhood wisdom host. We are back on to exploring another story of the devotees of Shiva, and this one is a tad dark. I want to start this narration with a question. Would you consider an eye for an eye as apt justice? Or would you stick to the now applicable proportional sentencing, restorative and rehabilitative forms as ideal ways to tackle crime and injustice? Think about it and now put yourself in the shoes of a person committing injustice, accidentally even, and also put yourself in the shoes of the person who is at the receiving end of that injustice. I bet your answers will mildly differ depending on whose shoes you're in. I thought about it. And I didn't like being in a space where I had to choose. That in itself was discomforting. But if you went back to 205 BCE and asked the then great Cholan king Ellalan, who is remembered across Tamil and Sri Lankan traditions, the answer would be simple: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Hammurabi's code from the Babylonian times resonated the same, and so did the Mesopotamians, and same with Manu Smriti, written by Manu. It made being kind and honest easy to adapt, fearing the effects of retribution. But it also confused justice with symmetry and kept societies trapped in vengeance. Here's the story of Ellalan, who became Manu Neeti Cholan, which translates to the Chola who upheld the laws of Manu. You will find his statue in the Tyagaraja Swami temple at Tiruvarur, and in various courts of justice in Tamil Nadu, starting with the Madras or Chennai High Court. This story of the Chola king dates back to many, many, many moons ago and is retold in Tamil devotional traditions, including the Periya Purana. There was once a young prince, the son of Ellalan. His name was Vidangan. He took his chariot out of the palace with his entourage. There was a bit of a commotion along the market streets, and a young calf, disoriented from the noise and large groups of men walking the street, slipped under the prince's chariot wheel and was crushed to death. The young prince, distraught with guilt, consulted the scholars and the priests. He held a penance to rid himself of the karma and guilt, but little did he know that his father, the just king, had an alternative for him. Ellalan, the king, was so righteous that he had hung a huge bell in the center of the town in hearing distance to the palace, and anyone at any time could come and ring the bell and demand justice, and justice would be delivered. That very night, a cow, the mother of the young calf, began to ring the bell of justice. The king stepped out to see the cow and demanded she be escorted to the palace. There the cow pointed her calf to the king and demanded justice be drawn to whoever was responsible for the death. Vidangan confessed to the incident, and the minister suggested that a longer penance must be performed to atone the sin of killing a calf. The cow sat in agony over losing her calf, and the king could not bear to see her in distress. He condemned the suggestions of the ministers and decided that, keeping to Manu's laws, his son must be punished for his deed, even though it was an accident. He declared that his son must be put under the chariot and be similarly crushed to death. He called for the ministers to ready the royal chariot and then lay his son under, his only heir to be executed. The ministers, appalled by the king's decision, refused to go ahead with the execution. The king, left with no choice, got up on the chariot and rode it over his son, crushing the young boy to death. The king Ellalan thus became Manu Neeti Cholan, referred to as the just and righteous king of the Chola Empire. As he and his subjects sat weeping, the lord of Tiruvarur, our beloved Somaskanda Shiva, appeared on the horizon with his consort Parvati and son Skanda and the other celestials. He praised the king for his sincerity toward his land and his subjects and resurrected the calf and his son too. The cow and the king were both relieved of their agony. The temple in Tiruvarur to this day worships Shiva as Vanchinattar Swami, the Lord who restores what justice alone cannot heal. So that was the story. And I can imagine that some of you listeners must be going through a sense of disgust, agony, sense of, God, what does the story even mean? But these could all be a start. And perhaps you're questioning, how is this even fair? Why would a loving God test his devotees as such? And how are these laws of Manu or Hammurabi even relevant to a time and age like ours? Let me clarify, this isn't relevant at all. And as a matter of fact, some of these laws were misogynistic and hierarchical, deeply concerned with property, status, and social order. But we were redeeming ourselves from a time that practiced Matsya Nyaya, the big fish eating the small fish. We were educating our kings that power and money does not allow you to get away from following and rightly committing to your dharma, and that there will be consequences even for the high and mighty. These stories were retold in town centers so that the praja would know of their rights and the raja would know of his duties. Now, let me weave another interesting perspective for you, one that's beyond an ancient Tamil story where a calf dies, a prince is responsible, a mother cow is in grief, and a king must act. That's the outer event. There is a second event happening in the inside, where we witness shock, rage, grief, guilt, fear, discomfort, moral certainty, and the desperate need to make the pain stop. Here it's not about right or wrong or grounding a king and his praja to their morals. It's asking ourselves what part of us needs suffering to be symmetrical before we feel satisfied. Is the king bound by dharma because the kingdom is watching? When we are the victim, we want justice to feel like compensation for our pain. When we are the offender, especially when the harm was accidental, we want mercy to enter the room. And when we are the public watching from a safe distance, we often want punishment to be dramatic enough to reassure us that moral order still exists. The mind is very clever, and I urge you to watch out for it. It can take fear and call it justice. It can take vengeance and call it dharma. It can take discomfort and build an entire philosophy around it. Because if the king acts only from guilt, that is not freedom. If the cow seeks only equal pain, that is not healing. If the kingdom applauds only because blood has balanced blood, that is not wisdom. That is simply disturbance finding a ritual form. It ends with Shiva entering the story and bringing back the calf and prince to life. Perhaps this is the beginning of a system that is restorative, rehabilitative, than symmetrical. Is Shiva the grace that we must allow to enter within us? I think so. I believe there is Shiva within us, the universe in my palm, and grace is to know I am capable of holding grief, of allowing justice to arrive from clarity than wound. In this story, I understand Ellalan as the reactive response we have for a problem, the grieving cow as the need we have to see an end for pain, retribution, even if it causes pain in another, and the young prince Vidhi Vidangan as our unconscious actions that we commit in haste. The fast text reply, the quick judgment or lack of, and ultimately Shiva as the consciousness. When it arrives, there is hope that we have suffered and that need not make us cruel. Hope that justice can become more than punishment. It can become restoration. On that note, I end this episode of Manu Neeti Cholan. If you are in India, then pop into the courts of Tamil Nadu sometime and you will see this king in action. Thank you for staying with me through this narration. And my next story is about the Baba devotee, where we explore the themes of the divine in our service. Until next time, thank you for staying tuned.